You unite people through mutual
I
hatred.
do. I do. That's fabulous, but it's true. They'll find you. I mean, and what I find fascinating is the ones that have survived into a sense of self awareness, and the others who are just like engines of gross banality. Just like
Yeah.
shut the fuck up, for Christ's sake, Jesus! You got
There's
nothing.
again, it's like a sense of you just haven't changed at all. Like it can be either, 8 years or 18 years or however many decades, and it's just like, how are you still the same as you were when you were like 17?
I mean, again, the drugs obviously didn't take for them as it did for me. I mean, it transformed my life. I mean, from the minute I got started getting high and getting drunk, I became this. I went from being as non-entity a fingerprint with glasses as you could possibly find. I mean, I went to one party before I was 16. They invited me once and never again. Get that guy out of here. And after that, I became the life of the party. I mean, it was and again, people who I haven't drank or used drugs in well over 3 decades. But and people in my line of experience who say their best days drunk were better than shut up. I had a great time, and then it stopped being a great time. So shut the fuck up already. Move on with that stuff. So
This
what are
has
we
been a
talking about
message
today?
from the Archbishop of Fun. Today we're talking about comic books.
I did a live art sale on Saturday, and Bill Cox, who moderated, was talking about how messy my studio looked. But it's a working shop. I mean, I'm sitting literally with my back to my drawing table where I should be right now, despite you, young man. Whatever. And so I'm taking time out from my valuable time out from my day to spend some time with you.
I'm not getting paid for
Swallow
this
before you
either,
talk. It's
so
always a good idea. Then again, you've got this is a gift from Joe Jutzko. Okay.
I remember I was on Facebook for like 2 weeks and there was like a screenshot that I found of you holding that mug and I just posted the caption "the man" and then you commented under it "es la verdad."
Like I said, I mean, I am the Archbishop of Fun. You know, I know too many people who are, who are the, the sisters of pain and the brothers of remorse. So I'd rather go out screaming and having a good time.
You
So what are
know,
we talking
the,
about today? We're talking about Too Dead to Die.
yes, we're doing a little bit of promo. It can't be all fun and rambling. We're doing a little bit of business here.
Of
But
course.
the last time we talked, I had some people reach out, some via YouTube comments, some via emails, and a few of them were just like, I love that CHAYKIN guy, but he blocked me on Facebook. And I'm just thinking, I don't care. I'm not your handler.
I have. I mean, one of the reasons I blocked them on Facebook is that here's where the narcissism and soul. Actually, I'm no longer a narcissist. I'm a solipsist now because I'm not as good looking as I used to be. You move when you're hurt with an unmade bed, you move from narcissism to solipsism, and I have no patience with people who think they're my equal unless they are. I mean, I had some schmuck out of Canada giving me a critique in this kind of like familial buddy way, like we were colleagues, and and fuck you. I mean, who the hell are you to talk to me in this way? Particularly because his observations were precisely exact what I specifically intended on this thing. And I got life is too short to deal with shitheads, unless you have to, in which case you put up with it for the briefest time, then you get rid of them as soon as you can.
Yeah,
that's the deal. So I'm a beloved figure, but difficult.
yes. And, if you get blocked, it's not a badge of honor. You're just fucking annoying. It's,
Yeah,
just deal
exactly. I
with
mean,
it. Deal with the consequences. Accept
just
rejection.
I mean,
It's okay.
es la verdad, es la verdad, and je suis là. I'm
Yeah.
there.
This is the story of diaspora. I feel like people who grew up reading like Superman and Justice Society of America don't get that. This is like people are complaining about like She-Hulk twerking, and I'm like, hey, I'm paying attention to the protest and revolution going on in Iran. We're not on the
Come
same
on. I
level
mean,
ideologically.
really? I, I think you and I are brothers. I mean, it's just, I am a number of people I've blocked are people whose minds are blown by that Chazarai. And
Yeah.
it's just like, if this is your level of excitement, you have to get out more.
Yeah.
I mean, real.
I had
I mean,
someone throw a temper tantrum at me because like I didn't promote their comic on here. They did that thing you were talking about, the whole buddy buddy thing. It's like I hate
right.
the over familiarity of people on the internet where it's like just because they follow you doesn't mean we're friends.
I'm not.
Then
My name is not Howie. My name
I
has never been
yeah,
Howie,
I hate that.
despite
Like
the fact. I mean, I fucking nicknames are like unsolicited advice. They're criticisms
yeah.
disguised as fun. Fuck you. You know what I'm saying? I mean, please, these guys who call me by a name that I've never answered to, these people. I mean, look, I mean, I'm not the best at what I do, but I'm among them, and the synergy that's made from the work that I do as a writer and artist, although we're talking today about me as an artist, puts me into a certain level of effectiveness. And I'm a Democrat, but I'm not that democratic. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So I personally find self-promotion shaming. It drives my wife nuts. My dog right now is looking at me with such despair right now. He's going, why? I have the ugliest dogs in the world, and I'm really grateful for this.
Too Dead to Die. Let's get into the promotion, I guess. People that you work with on this are a lot of the people that you name drop in, high esteem. Dave Johnson does the cover. My mind was blown to see some new Jose Luis Garcia Lopez pages. Yen Nitro's back, and Michael Golden is doing some art. So it's all of these people. It's just a bunch of name drops of people who know their shit and are influential.
People I love, And Guggenheim. I mean, for fuck's sake. I mean, Guggenheim, the only two people in the comic book writing community that I would jump to work at in a heartbeat are Mark and Mark. Guggenheim and Wade. They don't write like I do. They don't think like I do. But the choices they make as writers make sense to me. If that makes any sense to you. I mean, it's for the most part, my job as a comic book artist working with other writers is to translate video, literary narrative into a visual literacy and pictures imbued with narrative value. And the distinction that Mark Guggenheim brings to the table is both an intellectual and an instinctual understanding of the actual real estate of the page, of how much volume there really is, what needs to be presented, and how the use of a page as a defining as a spatial representation of time has its primary value, and that's what Mark does really well.
Was there an actual canceled Spirit story that you were doing with Guggenheim, or was that just bullshit?
No, I did it.
That was real.
Oh yeah, I drew it.
Okay. There's a lot in that introduction of the book. It's not out yet. It will be when this is out. That's like how much of this is BS and how much of it, like Jeffrey Harris. I mean, rest in peace, man. 36 issues, your collaborator.
No, but there really was. I mean, it's a kind of a funky story. It's and it never got printed.
In that introduction, it said it was a canceled story.
I don't remember. I mean,
that's a common theme with these conversations. Editorial seems to just like leave. It's like, hey, do the pages and we won't talk to you again. It's like professional ghosting.
I wrote a Spirit story that Brian Bolland drew, which was a lot of fun. And I did draw it, but again, I never pay attention to work. I don't really care once it's done. And I mean, for the same editor, as a matter of fact, I wrote two stories when there was originally an intention to include a backup features in one of their Western titles. And one of them he rejected outright, even though he paid for it, because he felt the audience wouldn't get it. And I objected at the time, and I've come to realize he was dead on the money, because these people would never. It was basically George Armstrong Custer, the later years. And it ended. And then I sold it to Dark Horse. John Seven was going to draw it. He did some preliminary drawings, and then he got very sick and died. So I ended up drawing it. And it's basically what happens when Custer, defeats the wins the Little Bighorn using the Hotchkiss and Gatling guns and becomes the president of the United States.
Yeah.
And the other piece was a piece about a Wyatt Earp type, more like a Bat Masterson type, who completely concocted and conflated his own reputation. And we see the actual reality of what it was. So those pieces never got published, and the Spirit, I guess, didn't either. I had no idea. I never looked. Mark and I done a couple of JSA stories. We did a whole stream of Wolverine, and his Blade concept was what got me to leave DC and go to Marvel. I don't care about Blade. I don't care about vampires, even though I done Black Kiss and shit. But it was so funny. It really just cracked me up. I don't know who the hell he was. I never heard of this guy. And I jumped on it. It was absolutely batshit. It was really, really wacky. And I like working with Mark. Mark calls, I'll work with him. That's the deal. I'm actually gonna see him on Wednesday night. We're doing a signing at a Pasadena comic shop, which, by the way, people who think I live in Los Angeles, Pasadena is like, I'm going to eat my young on the Donner Pass to get there, that kind of stuff, It was a long ride. So I'm going a long distance in the name of signatures. What a wonderful guy I turned out to be.
Welcome to fandom.
I escaped fandom the minute I started taking a professional dollar. It was the experience I had in my first year of working professionally completely and utterly eviscerated anything I had left of fandom. The third volume of Hey Kids Comics is about fandom. And it's about my fan experience. It's about the fan experience of others, because comic books owes its existence to fandom. And so the cold opening of the first issue is about an actual experience I had at Marvel when I first came to work there. The personalities are different, but the words are there. There you go. So yeah, but I look, comic books is a calling. I mean, I was a completely obsessed fan. Somebody published the cover of the first Brave and Bold that Kubert did for Hawkman, and those 6 issues of Hawkman that Kubert did are the only Hawkman stuff of any value whatsoever. No one else did anything. I mean, his depiction of that character in those 6 issues is canon. It really is. It was so fucking nutty looking. The scripts are so shitty. Oh my God, they're so terrible.
They're all like Space Cop or like Super Cop or something.
Well, Gardner Fox. Well, we love Gardner as kids. Gardner Fox, John Broome. They're just dreadful. Just Azarai, they're the worst. So, but again, who am I here? They're dead men, so I can talk about them. It doesn't matter.
You're working on this book, even though it's Mark Guggenheim writing the script. There are some Chaykinisms in there.
How do you mean?
Let me mention a specific scene before I get into a question. There's a moment where this guy Agent Sato shows up and he's like, this guy's more trouble than he's worth, and then there's a close-up on Simon's face and he's like, this is not untrue. There's a moment where you could have just written in Es la verdad and like drawn him to slightly look like yourself and then moved on.
Look, I mean, as you've heard me say more than once, the writing in comic books is not exclusively the writer's job. The writing of comics is a collaboration between a writer who writes a template and an artist who delivers a visual narrative. And my breakdown and interpretation of the book isn't an exact reflection of what Mark gave me. It's closer, for example, than many of the other work I've done with other writers. But it's still a matter of adjustment. And what I always try to make a point of confirming what my collaborator's money shot is on each page, what that collaborator wants most to be seen and to be understood by the reader. And with Mark, that's pretty easy. I took some liberties here and there. I made Cross a bit, nastier than I think he might have intended that last scene on the aerofoil boat. But I had a good time with that too. And the book was a very satisfying working experience. I never felt overwhelmed, subsumed, or annoyed, which for me, because I live in a state of annoyance, is a pretty fabulous experience.
You're doing a lot of action in this book. Normally you do cars, suits, women. This one has a little bit of that. Did you ease into the action aspect?
I had to relearn it. I really did. I also had to remember that this wasn't a Gil Kane approach. This wasn't an elaborately dance-based choreography of action, because so much of what I grew up with. I mean, I'm not a Kirby guy. I'm a Gil Kane guy. But trying to do action material that was not over the top, because it didn't call for that. I mean, Simon Cross is basically only a couple of years younger than me. He's fit, but he's still an old fucker, and I wanted to make certain that I wasn't, doing young beards in old clothes, in young bearded men in white hair, that kind of shit. I think Mark was surprised when he saw the first pages, and Cross had a beard, and then, as you know, the beard disappears, and that beard, that choice was a very, very conscious decision, because I felt it was important to establish the level of despair the character was experiencing, and the sudden response to trauma that woke up something in him that he didn't know still remained, and I felt it had to be visualized in that way. And Mark, of course, had not seen the pages or me, and when he saw me, he says, "Oh, that's why the beard." Okay, good, And by the way, this beard precedes the COVID hysteria, the slow motion apocalypse, the collapse of Western civilization. There well before the breakdown, I was walking around like this, and I never shave again. Thankfully, because I had it trimmed yesterday, I said, "Oh, we're quite so Old Testament."
You see a lot of bandwagoners there, accepted to have the beard thing or the mustache thing.
Well, somebody pointed out that the beard is a man's version of a push-up bra, and I'm willing to go along with that.
Sure, whatever.
I mean,
hey, if your beard doesn't connect, that's not my problem. There we go.
I am loving you more and more every time you open your mouth. Thank you very much.
You mentioned it. It's the whole, he found something that he didn't know he still had, and it's visualized in, he wears the suit. He's not running around like running shorts and his wife beater. He shaves the beard. He starts settling into this old role, and it kind of goes into that thing that you don't see with these kind of stories, like a James Bond type, where it's like, what and then what? He meets the love interest, he beats the villain with the silly name and plan, and then he goes on, and then it's just kind of same thing over and over again. And this follows through with that, but also kind of goes onto that same highway of, this is all I know, like this is what I'm good at. Like after decades of doing this is who he is, but he still has that old dog new tricks mentality.
Well, I mean, there's a lot of people have wanted to explore this aspect of this sort of character, and I'm really gratified that Mark found an approach, an attack on the concept that I could both visually establish well, and also that resonated with me. Otherwise, it wouldn't have been quite so successful a project. And I'm very happy with that working relationship. It can be a nuisance, but Mark understands that he's not writing for me as the audience, that he's writing for me in collaboration. And he also does something that I think is really significant. He provides, when he describes something, he will frequently find something on the internet and insert it into the script, which I really like. I may not use the reference he suggests, but reminds me that reference is worth using, because I don't fake anything. I take it back. I can fake a man's suit like a son of a bitch, but that's thanks to Johnny Craig. But yeah, that all the technology. I mean, I'm not really hip to a lot of current military stuff, because I live in a small town and I don't really give a shit about that stuff. But if I'm going to do it, I have to get it right. And getting it right was made much easier by Mark's inclusion in this stuff in the script. I'm really grateful for that.
So there's that book, Sparring with Gil Kane, and you have some interviews in there. You wrote the introduction. I know this is an interview from 1983 or 4, but there's a moment where you're talking about Gil's process, and when he was drawing on the page, it would be pretty much as you would see it. All of the blacks and everything were there. What's your process? Or has it changed over time?
There's no resemblance to that whatsoever. Going back to the Blade material, are you ready for a long story?
Let's go for it. This is what we're here for. So
it's involved in complex. The issue 4 of Blade took place in a department store at Christmas time, which is an absolute nightmare to draw. And so I made a decision to serve time and money. I found 3 photographs of Macy's, the shopping floor, at different angles. blew them up to 11 by 17, traced them, and then added Christmas decorations. So I had 3 views of a shopping floor. And 18 of the 22 pages of the book took place in this department store. And one of the unintended results of this was discovering that even though there were only 3 views, by flopping and by cropping, it enhanced the verisimilitude of the material to a profound and dramatic degree. This called back to an experience I'd had a few years earlier, working on the first book I did when I came back to comics after I got shit canned from TV. Where I was working with the estimable Don Cameron, who had argued with me endlessly about the use of Photoshop and repetition in comics. And I'd come to realize that he was right and I was wrong. At that point, he wrote a manual on how to do comics with Photoshop, for which I paid him. And that manual became the de rigueur study guide for every assistant I've hired since. So now, some 20 years later, or close to it, I no longer do pages. I do figures and backgrounds on separate sheets and combine them in Photoshop. I scanned all of my patterns, all the Zipatone stuff, all the textural patterns. It's all scanned and all digitized. And the effect is that, I no longer have pages designed, but I've designed full pages. I'll show you if you want to see what I'm working on right now. Just as an example. You ready? This is page 1 of issue 2 of volume 3 of Hey Kids Comics. As you can see, you got insets and stuff like this, but the top panel will be an establishing shot of a jungle, and the middle panel will be figures. So I'll show you the figures if you want to see them as well. These are the figures. They've basically been preliminarily inked and erased. After I get off with you, I'll take a blue pencil and start reinserting the material that's disappeared in the erasure, polish them, and scan them. Ken Bruzenak, who covers production and lettering on my work, will then get them tomorrow and start the accumulation. And we will basically tweak the fuck out of this shit before it goes anywhere. The reason for doing this is time saving, because it's easier to clean up against a white surface, and it makes it possible to do 20 to 25 pages a month without hysteria. And I'm a great believer in production toward volume. I mean, I come out of production. My first job as an artist was as a paste-up man for a company that did fashion model composites. The skill set of using an X-Acto knife, rubber cement, spray mount, press type, and all that stuff continues to be of value to me. I mean, Flag was an example of the use of xerography and paste-ups consistently, and Photoshop simply is a transliteration of the use of production and production skills in the service of comics. And I've sacrificed the pages, but let's face it, I don't have a real commercial footprint anyway, so it doesn't really matter. I'm interested in the reproduction and what it looks like when it's finished, and that's where it's at. So the pages in Simon Cross were done exactly this way. In organization of figures and backgrounds on separate sheets.
This is more of a question for Ken, but one of my favorite things about the book is the way his lettering changes. For the main book, he does his more modern lettering style, and then you have the backups, which are supposed to be, unprinted or out of print stories. That's where you have like the Michael Golden, the Jose Luis stuff, your stuff, and he goes from that modern to that more old school lettering style.
Well, Bruzenak, I believe, is the best man working in comics in this day. I mean, he established more tropes and more patterns than any 3 people combined, but he gets no attention because he doesn't self-promote. He keeps a very low profile. And one of the things I find most fascinating about Ken is that he gets all the work he gets is generated by the work he's done for me, and yet the people who hire him don't get him to do for him what he does for me. Taking advantage of that vast range of knowledge and skill set. I mean, for example, in the Divided States of Hysteria, when I wrote the script, when I gave him the script, I included in the script the phrase internet chatter, because at that point, that was a phrase that was all over the culture. And what I expected was something like the buttons from the Go Gangs in Flag. And what I got was this page covering graphic nonsense gibberish that was such a great contribution to the book, to the graphic effect of the book. It was staggering. Now, in the sequel to Divided States of Hysteria, which I've been struggling to finish the script on, it's a pain in the ass. It's really difficult. And of course I have, because I haven't really been able to commit to it and do nothing else, but I keep starting over and over again. Mm-hmm. It's 6 issues. It's written. I'm in my 3rd draft now. In lieu of that, what we've got is a random artificial intelligence bot that is creating havoc for both mass media and politics, and creating and that I know full well that he'll come up with something completely fucked up that will convey that idea in the best possible way. I have complete faith.
Even everything in the book where he doesn't try to make it look like a facsimile of like a pill bottle. He'll go and design labels of a pill bottle, painstakingly do all of those details. And that's something where if you don't pay attention to this stuff, or if you're just buying Spider-Man on a monthly basis and then you throw the book in a pile somewhere and never look at it again, it's just something you don't appreciate.
Years ago, I did a book that a story that he didn't letter, and one of the panels was the front page of Variety. And after 5 tries, I just said I gave up, because I'd given it to Ken, it would look like the front page of Variety. The title, the logo would be right, everything would be right. And the guy's letter was a perfectly good letterer, but Bruzenak and I are twin sons of different mothers. And I mean, I've known Ken since 1971 or 72. And we never liked each other. We hated each other the minute we met. And when I was doing Flag, I was talking to Joe Duffy at Marvel, and I was looking for a letterer. And she came up with his name. I said, "Oh, that guy. We met. And from that point on, it's like, okay, we're in. This is good, you know? And it's just, you know, and giving him the freedom, the head to do what he wants to do, you know, it works 99.99 times. It just, I mean, where it doesn't work, it's fixable. But when it does, I mean, I know it's terrible, but the comics right now is a place in which the writer is the alpha. And one of the problems with that is that writers tend to look at lettering as a delivery system of the textual experience, and that's that. And that's not what lettering is. I mean, there's 6 people involved in a comic book, where the editor, the writer, the artist, the colorist, the letterer, and the reader. And lettering is a part of the graphic experience. And with the advent of computer color, and with the advent of smart computer colorists, color is now a part of that narrative experience. I work with a guy named Gustavo Yen, who works on the name of Yen Nitro. And one of the things that's happened in the Crossbook was he finally nailed the use of color as a storytelling device. And that the fruit of that shows up in the first issue of Hey Kids Volume 3. It's astonishing. It really is. It's cinematic in a way that has more to do with cinematography than sweep. And he got there in the Crossbook. You look at the Paris sequences in the Crossbook. It's really there.
Yeah.
You know, he sells the city, and you believe it. Then you go underwater. That underwater sequence is dynamite. It's just fuck. And then the sequence of the aerofoils. It's swell. I mean, he really enhances everything. Everything that Mark and I have done is enhanced dramatically by both Ken's work and Gustavo's work.
And you tend to work with some of the same people over time, especially the modern stuff. Do you see that improvement or development when you're working with these guys?
Oh, fuck yeah. I mean, one of the things that one of the great cosmic truths of my generation is that we were deeply steeped in those who came before us. And the irony is, you now have the internet where you can see everything at all times, and there are people who just have no fucking idea what came before them because they're incurious, or they're afraid of being identified as imitating or learning from something else. I bought Gustavo a book featuring the artist named Herbert Paus, who was a great artist of the first half of the 20th century. He made the mistake of dying in 1946. And he's recently been, in the past 5 years, rediscovered. I've been a collector for many, many years. And I could see the impact the work had on Gustavo within days. He became much more formalized and much clearer and much simpler without losing any of the narrative beauty of the page. I was delighted. It was really good. I insist that he join a Facebook page called Today's Inspiration, which is there's an archive of illustrators that goes back to the 1920s. That is just sensational. So I look at all this stuff all the time. You know, I start my day every day by looking at a little bit of Alex Toth, a little bit of Wallace Wood, and a little bit of John Severin. But I also have I have tear sheet on top of tear sheet of American illustration. And I stand on the shoulders of giants, and I'm never ashamed to admit it. You know, I learned everything I know from 5 guys. And those guys taught me how to do what I do for a living, and I can't pay them back. So I'm the guy who basically, you know, pushes it forward. Gil Kane, Wallace Wood, Gray Morrow, Neil Adams, and Joe Orlando, who rabbied me at DC Comics to protect me from Carmine Infantino, who hated me because I was associated with Gil Kane, whom he hated since they were 14. And by the way, my understanding is that Gil gave Carmine every reason to hate him. He had every right to loathe him.
There's a book that you were doing with John Romita Jr., that mobster book. Is that still happening, or is that?
Yeah. Oh yeah. John, all 5 issues are written. John has drawn 3. I had a very stern meeting with him when I was in Connecticut this past summer, where we said, "Come on," you know. But John is just, you know, he's subsumed by Marvel work. He's getting it done. It is. I can say unequivocally, it is so shockingly blown away. It's as if he was channeling just a touch of Botero for comics. It's beautiful work. It's just great.
It'll be exciting to see him do more indie stuff also.
Oh, it will. I mean, and basically he should hate me because I did not make this an easy job to do. Each issue starts with a 2 or 3 page history of something, each panel requiring a lot of reference. And his solution to the problems, I made a lot of problems for him. I was, you know, not kind. But it really has a 70s vibe. It's beautiful. It's sexy without being dirty. And it's I mean, he came to me with the idea. I shaped the idea into a formal structure and actually gave it a story. And it's all there. You know, so much. You know, I spent the 1970s in New York City as you know, in my 20s, and there were some of the most. I mean, they were terrifying, but some of the most fun I've ever had in my life. And I've managed to try to find a recreation of that sensibility in that material, and I'm really happy with it. And I think John is just like, holy shit, it's just great.
Have you been doing shows or cons? Have you been doing the in-person thing?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I flew home on Monday from Columbus, Ohio. Speaking of the Midwest, speaking of Podunk, Middletown, and East Sullivan's Breath, and I was delighted to see it was a convention center. It was in downtown, and Columbus has a jump in downtown. I had a great time. You know, and a week before that, I was in Tenerife and the Canary Islands, and then in Madrid. You know, so I've been traveling. I'm just beginning to make my bookings for 2023. I booked for the summer a little bit, and I'm looking at the spring. I don't see myself doing any convention traveling until March, but things are coming in, and serious potential of being in Rome in May, and because I could dig that. I like Italy, as we call it in New York. Italy. I'm going to Italy. You know, Italy. So it's been a while. And you know, hitting the East Coast, so I'm available. You know, I'm again, you know, I have that weird relationship to comics fandom in that I don't have a real commercial following or a commercial footprint, but you know, except for that Star Wars crap, and you know that you know, whenever I hear clients, but all the exposure I got on Star Wars didn't amount to jack shit in any connectivity to the work that I've done that I'm actually proud of. So exposure can go fuck itself in a big way. Yeah. The end.
I promise you, most of the people who reached out and they're like, "Hey, CHAYKIN blocked me," are the people who only know you from Star Wars, and then the people who are like, "Hey, Hey Kids Comics is so venomous," or whatever. Like, that makes them uncomfortable. My
Well,
rose-colored glasses, no.
no, I mean, look, I mean, Stan promulgated this bullshit myth of us being just a bunch of comic book loving guys, you know. And by the same token, you had guys like Jack and Woody, who for some reason thought they were going to be immune to the shitstorm that happened to everybody else in comics. Comics will break your heart, kid. Well, shut up. You know, you knew the job was dangerous when you took it, just like Super Chicken said. You know, it's just expect the narcissism incumbent in expecting that your treatment is going to be different than everybody else is staggering to me. You know, just why would you think you're going to be treated any better than anyone else?
Yeah.
You know, it's not a business that is comics is not a meritocracy. You know, comics is an aspirational medium. The really popular guys, for the most part, are the guys that draw the way the audience would if it only could. When I'm accused of being self-deprecatory, I explain to people that I know how good I am. I am very, very good at what I do. But that very, very good standard has very little to do with the standards that are brought to the table by most enthusiasts. Most enthusiasts thinks that the transliteration of comic book stories to movies and television is just great. Where I believe that the only thing about comic books that has any genuine value is the language used to convey the narrative. You know, when I watch shows like, I watch WandaVision all the way through because my editor insists that I do, because then he would tell me a joke at the end. I don't remember the end of the show. I don't remember the joke. It was just obvious and nonsensical. You know, when in the first episode of Falcon and Winter Soldier, when the bank turns down the Falcon for a loan, I said, this is bullshit. This bank would give them every penny he asked for with a no interest loan, just so they could say, you know what we did this week? We gave the Falcon $1 million. But it doesn't fit into the narrative, the moronic narrative that supports this bullshit. And let's face it, Mandalorian is on a level of CHAYKIN. You know, it's just, ugh. I'm sorry. It's the language of comics that matters, not the content. But the audience likes the content. I read a thing in Wired this morning about Alan Moore saying very much about the puts words into Alan's mouth that are very much what I've been saying for years. That, you know, I mean, I have no problem with superhero comic books. I have problems with 60-year-old men being entertained by the same shit they entertained when they were 12, only with the addition of the slather of gravitas, you know, and a penis, you know, this kind of shit. You know, the best Superman story I've read in the past 25 years was Tom DeHaven's book, It's Superman. It was just lovely. I started reading it in New York on a flight home, and I was crying over Pittsburgh. You know, I'm a big weeper.
So Wood had this quote, and this is paraphrasing, but apparently he would tell assistants, "Don't do that Jack Kirby shit." Did you ever meet Jack? Did you ever have any?
No, I never met Jack. I met Stan only 3 times. 2 of them to be scolded, and I've never met Jack. I didn't go to his funeral because I didn't know him. When I heard after the fact that Roz got pissed off that Frank making all this Christy shit in his remarks at the funeral, I was like, boy, I'm glad I missed that shit. You know, you know, Gil always said that Jack was the angriest man he ever knew, and my favorite part about the whole thing was Art Spiegelman forgiving Jack Kirby for being Jack Kirby on some YouTube video. Oh God, please, what nonsense.
I don't know, the whole like indie highbrow mindset to me is just as bad as like the people who haven't stopped reading Superman since they were like 6. It's I mean, if all you read is Crumb or Spiegelman, that's just as bad as reading only Batman comics.
Look, I mean, I got into it with a colleague of mine who was appalled by the fact that I didn't agree wholeheartedly with his rejection of Crumb as a sexist, racist, and bigot. I regard Crumb as one of the great transgressive artists of the 20th century. I put him in the same class as Judy Chicago and Robert Mapplethorpe. I truly do. I don't want to spend any time with him. You know, I mean, sorry, but the work is brilliant. A couple of years back, I was a guest at a convention in Buenos Aires, and the day before the show was about to begin, the only other mainstream guy who was invited backed out. A colleague of ours who died a couple of months back. And I found myself spending the week in Buenos Aires surrounded by these art college shitheads who were the most, I mean, and significantly, we were all staying in one hotel except for Spiegelman, who would not stay at that hotel, you know, as limousine liberal as you could find. And these people were as condescending as anyone I've ever met in my life. They assumed, and you've heard me say more than once, I'm too mainstream for the weird and too weird for the mainstream. You know, these people all assumed that I was a happy-go-lucky Marvel Comics guy doing superhero comic books. And yeah, and I'm looking at this guy's like, no. And my wife and I are sitting at a dinner table, a plank table, and across from us is a Uruguayan couple talking about me in Spanish, and I'm reasonably fluent. And I was regarded as something like a talking dog. It wasn't so much that I had anything to say, but that I could do it at all. It was pretty interesting. And you know, I just, you know, I don't know if he ever went over, but Daniel Close was invited to a show at the Lake Como show, which is, you know, a mainstream cartoon fest, you know. And I told Frank Cho, I said, I can't wait to hear about how that played out, because I can't imagine that Close would look at you or talk to you with anything but utter and complete disdainful contempt. And you know, and that's been my experience, you know, Close and Friedman, Drew Friedman, who I really admire, and I admire Close as well. Are guys who came to comics, you know, reading superhero comic books like, oh, you know, and then they outgrew them and went into other things. I have as well, but I still use a mainstream construct and format to do my work. Anecdotally, many years ago, in the 1980s, one of my assistant's best friends was a guy who was an absolute fanatic for George Perez's work. I mean, he would have gladly become his love slave. And when that issue of Crisis on Infinite Whatevers came out with all the characters that DC had ever published in their entire existence, drawn by George, he had a meltdown in the studio. It was like, you know, it's like me being invited over to dinner with Bernadette Peters, and just completely lost it. Insane, you know. It was like, and he was, and I made fun of him, we mocked him, we ridiculed him, because I'm not a particularly kind person. And some years later, I got a letter from him apologizing for the meltdown, because at that point, he'd gone from being that fanboy meltdown kid to one of the Gavons, one of the doyens of the independent comics movement. And it was just hysterical. And every time I run into this guy, and I see him every now and then, mostly on Zoom meetings, I like to just give him the look without acknowledging ever going there, but the look that says, you know, you know. It was fabulous. You know, it intrigues the fuck out of me, the parochial nature of people who feel the need to call it a graphic novel. It's comic books, you know. Graphic novels are the sort of people who, you know, are for people who are embarrassed by the world in which they live, who don't like to talk about their family. And I'm good. You know, I'm not a graphic novelist. I'm a comic book man. I'm a cartoonist. And I hold that as a badge of honor. And it's a good thing, you know. Right. I totally agree. I mean, when I do mainstream superhero comic book work, it's a journeyman's approach to it, because I don't have the kind of sensibility that makes it possible for me to do the bounding comic book stuff. Because I'm not interested in it particularly. I like people talking, yelling at each other, shooting each other, and fucking each other. Those are the things I like. You know, years ago, there's a poet named Jeffrey O'Brien, who's also a great social critic and literary critic as well, who wrote a book called Hard-Boiled America, and who pointed, and it was a book about the relationship between text and visuals in paperbacks in the 1950s. And he taught, and I'm paraphrasing here, he said that crime fiction is at least as fantastical as science fiction, but it remains based on an observed reality. And when I was a kid, I hated observed reality. I just loathed it. I really loved space opera and fantasy, sword and planet, sword and sorcery. And as older I've gotten, the more I like observed reality. I mean, it's I have no taste whatsoever for fantasy television. I watch all of Game of Thrones, and I have no interest whatsoever in seeing its sequels. I watch a lot of television, none of which has ray guns or swords in it. Except for Last Kingdom, which has swords, you know, and I'm looking forward to Winter King. But the list of shows of literary content that I would like to see adapted, there's not a single thing on it that's science fiction, with the exception of Nova by Chip Delaney and The Stars My Destination by Alfred Bester. Yeah. Both of which I think would make great movies and great streaming.
Nova was the one you said it's not like Star Trek where it kind of reflects real life. It's so alien.
It's bad shit. Yeah. I mean, I'm friends with Delaney again on Facebook. We haven't seen each other in years. And Chip is the worst speller I've ever read in my life. It's amazing. It's like, I want to, Chip, autocorrect, motherfucker. Come on, don't do that. but Nova remains. He was talking about Nova a couple of weeks ago on Facebook, and it's a transformative novel. It really is. It's Moby Dick. I mean, in the same way that if the Stars of My Destination is the Count of Monte Cristo, Nova is Moby Dick. It's a search for the great white whale, Illyrium, and I read it when I was 18, and it blew my mind, as so many minds were blown by WandaVision. But I think mine was more available to be blown because I had so many drugs in my system. It was fabulous. But I got weaned away from SF in the mid 70s by Archie Goodwin, of all people, who had me read crime fiction instead. I'm reading Quentin Tarantino's cinema speculation right now, and I'm loving it. I really am. Even when I disagree with him entirely, I like what he has to say about movies so much. And he is, in the best sense of the word, a complete asshole. But better an asshole than a creep. You know, it's the best. So we have digressed.
Do you think there's anything that we left out, or anything you want to throw out there?
I don't know. I don't think so. I mean, buy the new book. It'll be out on Wednesday. I'll be in Pasadena to sign books. So those of you who are seeing this after the fact, you missed it. I congratulate myself for being capable of maintaining two diametrically opposed ideas at the same time. I'm perfectly happy and really pissed off almost all the time. And I can do this. And it takes experience, it takes skill, but I'm doing what I can do with it. And again, I hope to see some of you on campus as the year progresses. My plan is not to die too soon, but sooner or later. And those of you who know me and know me well are expected to show up at my memorial and get laughs at my expenses just fine. I'm good. Thank you.